Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marketing Water Cooler podcast. My name is Jeremy Francesi. I hope you're doing well. Steph, what's going on? And what are we getting into on this one?
Let's talk about making long-term plans.
Long-term plans. People won't like this one. They like the episodes that go through and say 3 tips to blow up sales in 45 days for the new year. But hey, tough love. I think as you go into New Year conversation, you'll notice some of the episodes are around maximizing closing of the year, building camaraderie around a strategy for the new year with your team, maybe coaching up if you're a marketing manager and you're trying to get leadership on board. But look, I think there's something to be said, and the punchline of the episode is you need to be very realistic heading into January. And that's coming from somebody that is always like be unrealistic. And you know, the best advice, it's not the best advice I ever heard, but like one of the top things I've ever heard is instead of what's the worst that can happen, it's what if it's better than you could possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. So I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always going to tell you to lean forward into the unlimitless possibilities. But if you're in a marketing leadership role and you're starting a podcast as a part of your 2022 initiative and you're forecasting meetings in January from that podcast, you're crazy. Right? Like you're absolutely insane. Like and it's not because you're not going to make a good podcast. It's not because you're not going to make something that's interesting. It's because it takes time. It takes time. The first week of the year, nobody's going to be buying your stuff anyway. It's the first week of the year. Like you have to account for the first quarter of the year, the new year trickling in, people coming off vacation, clearing out their inbox. So if you're starting your podcast and you're dropping episode 1 the 6th of January, and you're going to have 4 episodes go live that month, what are 4 episodes going to do to your pipeline? Like, you have to have a little bit of an understanding. So not digging in to be negative, but I really do think it's important to frame it up. So with that in mind, here's really the framework for this conversation. There has to be a separation between short-term marketing to support monthly, quarterly targets and what you're doing to support the long-term effect of the business. Now, when I say long-term, I'm not talking about 5 years, but I am talking about it takes 6 to 12 months for you to really iron out the kinks if you're going to have a mix that's both paid media, organic media, a podcast, a show, having guests, doing solo episodes, repurposing things. Like, if you're going to turn on that engine, if you think it's going to work, like, and you're going to get it perfect in the first 2 weeks, you're just crazy. And the ones that have done it before, that maybe you're at a new company that are listening, you're probably like, yeah, he's right. The ones that have no idea, lean into it, go all into it, but have an understanding. And when you communicate with sales, if you go in and you're like, we're going to start a show in January and you can expect marketing to create 10 new meetings a month for you starting in January, you're going to have some terrible conversations with sales the 3rd week of sales when 0 demos have been set, when no meetings have come in. So how do we frame it then? Like, is it worth it? There's a couple of things to consider. One is thinking about your podcast or show or that series and systematic approach to content, which always defaults to a podcast style because it's so efficient and effective. But getting ahead of the need and focusing on demand generation will help sales. But you have to set the right expectations. It will help them build value, right? We have a private, and this is so semantic, details and so simple, but like, we have a private equity client. I always say, send me some stuff when it comes through a website, just so I can see the dialogue, the leads that come in. One of our private equity friends, like, hey, I really like your website based on these things that you've described and how you've approached this. We have a global this, that, and that to help people with capital. Would love to set up a call. It looks like a really good opportunity. And it was one of those things where, like, they're raising $500 million through one of their ventures. So that could be a really good opportunity for them. That website also went live with that exact same structure and content like 5 months ago. Right? And so if you're moving content, you're pushing a podcast, you're changing a strategy, you're doing things in a way that's changing the game, You have to plan for how it impacts short and long-term goals. Otherwise, you're just going to have a really tough environment between you and leadership. Because they're going to be like, hey, Brad, you promised us this much X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, I thought it would work. Why did you think it would work? You put up one blog post, right? Steph, what do you got for me?
I mean, I think it's as simple as like planting a garden, kind of that world of analogy where you plant the seeds at the beginning of the summer, but you have to wait until the end of the summer to get your tomatoes and your cucumbers and all that stuff, and it takes time, but it will be worth it. If you're doing the work correctly and, staying consistent and cleaning out the weeds and whatnot, then it will have a successful harvest.
100%. If you're using that and really the conversation for ABM, like account-based marketing, like these are the 100 companies we want to do business with over the next year. And you're like, we're going to start a podcast to interview those people. If you do this, you're going to burn all of your leads. If you start a podcast to interview people to then sell them 5 minutes after the interview ends, you fucking missed the boat.
Right.
You missed the boat, because now every single thing that you do will always feel toxic and transactional by default, because all you did was manipulate somebody into meeting with you to be on a podcast so you could sell them something.
Right.
So if your CFO, your leadership, your head of revenue is like, start a podcast, interview them, and then pitch them. And then after the meeting, they're like, well, why don't you have any appointment? Why aren't they on a demo? You have to reframe that conversation. You have to reframe why and how it works, because it does build value. It does build relationships. People can't buy from you unless they know you. I would say a podcast is a pretty good way to get to know somebody that you don't know. Because here's how it can play out, right? Let's say you do a podcast with them. Then maybe there is a trade show and you guys get out there and like, Jeff, hey, we haven't talked or we didn't get to meet, but the podcast was a blast. You shake hands, you get to know each other. Maybe you go grab a dinner. Maybe you break bread together. Maybe you grab drinks together. You support them on LinkedIn. You get involved on LinkedIn and digitally become a part of the community. And then maybe you reach out 6 months later, 9 months later, whatever it may be, and say, hey, I feel like I've noticed you sharing a lot about this. Or when you talked last time when we were at that conference in South Florida, you shared a little bit about this. And it made me think that I think there may be a way we can help you. Jeff, are you open to a conversation? All of a sudden, it's like, we've gotten to know each other for 6 months. Yeah, let's set up a time to talk. The podcast felt genuine and productive. Shaking your hand and meeting in person felt honest and authentic. Everything we've had from a correspondence standpoint was clearly honest and genuine of just getting to know each other. I don't mind the ask. And so there has to be some authenticity to it, rather than put them in the hot seat, ask them 12 questions, let it close out, and then ask them if they want a demo. So framing up how it's going to play, I always say it's a Trojan horse, but let's use our show for an example. Our season 1 was 30 episodes and we didn't interview a single person. We got our process, and before we even came in here, I run a show that has almost 80 episodes, right? So now you're jumping in to help with production on that, to build that out and change and think about things differently and improve the quality of what we're doing. And like, it's been a blast, but it's like, even we said, you know what, this is a really important part of our business. This show today is like, how do we add value to the community? So we built out the first 30 episodes. We have ironed out a way to create 2 to 3 episodes every single week, no matter if I'm in a different state or we've produced episodes of this show in 5 different states.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. And it didn't skip a beat. We didn't have a single file that corrupted. We didn't have a single episode that didn't work. Everything went out on time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 3 times a week for going on now 8 weeks. This time when you listen to it, it'll be closer to probably 8 weeks at that point, right? 10 weeks will close out Thanksgiving. And from September 21st until the end of November, we'll have 30 episodes out 3 times a week, 10 weeks, audio and video, as well as micro content across the board. We now know so clear as day that we can launch a new brand identity, build a show, shape it, execute it, and in 10 weeks, have a full season of value-add content with 100 to 200 pieces of micro content, probably more, that's now able to fill our social strategy around how and what we want to communicate to the world based on our value. So when we go into season 2 and interview another 30 guests to build relationships, We know the experience will be good for them. We understand the shape of the show. We know how to extract value in a way that's not only effective, but it's efficient as hell. We understand the process of how to use it as an instrument to support the business and the relationships we want to develop. We run an agency and we wanted to take the time to shape it. So for you, going into New Year, thinking about what you're using, I hope that gives you a little bit of confidence and comfort to think like, all right, how's this going to develop? It's
Mhm.
going to take you a second to get comfortable on the mic. It's going to take you a second to learn how to move the media around, right? It's going to take you a second to figure out how you want the show to feel. Just because you slapped a logo on it doesn't mean it's yours. It just means you happen to make it, right? And the distinction is it a personality? Is it a brand? Is it a value add? Or is it just two people talking in a microphone? So plan to work out the kinks. Be honest about expectation setting. That doesn't mean it's not going to drive results, but you got to set things up for success or you're setting yourself up for failure. Because you're not going to launch a show, put 20 meetings on the calendar and 4 episodes without spending any money on anything other than just producing an episode, because
Mhm.
there's just so much content out there. There's 2 million podcasts. So you got to think of how it's different. You got to think of what it means. But if you do it right, you build an asset that allows you to support new relationship development in perpetuity. It gives you a position to support the entire content strategy you want to support across all of your pillars. It allows you to learn at scale after you put things out because it gives you the capacity to systematically create content, share it in a higher volume than you otherwise would be able to, then learn from the qualitative and quantitative data that's presented on a social environment, from likes to comments to messages to how it hits different channels and so forth, to improve and learn from your customer. If you play out an 18-month roadmap, you build the show, you build a systematic approach to communicating your value to a community, building a bonfire through the podcast. You get to meet and get involved and get out of obscurity with the key people that matter in your market, your top customers. Okay, maybe now 7, 8 months in, you want to start a panel. You want to start a monthly panel with 4 to 6 people that circle the things you guys are talking about. Well, now you have 15 people you've interviewed and they know you and trust you, respect you. And you say, hey, to you 4 people, I thought we had really good chemistry on mics, on camera. I want to do a monthly podcast where we talk about these things. Would you be interested for 30 minutes once a month? And then now you go from a podcast to a more informal but a virtual event that could be an AMA. It could be a structured, you directing a panel and then a Q&A at the end of it. That can be value and help support them. And then it scales into an event because you've started to go from being in your own little vacuum of a podcast to a panel to support different conversations and value for the community, to maybe a local event or a larger event. Because now they look at your brand and your people and you say they facilitate thoughtful discussion. They're people we enjoy working with. They understand how to execute when it comes to creating infrastructure around this type of a conversation. Everything then makes sense because you started 18 months ago. So if you can frame that and say, we want to be the leader in the industry, and in 2024, we want to be able to run events and be the authority in the space, start a podcast today. Put 20 episodes out where you work out the kinks. You get really good at it. You understand what you want it to be. Then bring guests in because then they're walking into something that you understand how to operate,
Mhm.
right? There's a reason when you get your driving permit, you're not allowed to have guests in it for a little while, right? It's not safe. And then you grow from there. And if you can position that to sales and say, look, we're going to help you with short-term opportunities. We're going to figure out a way through other adjunct marketing efforts to support the monthly and quarterly initiatives to convert lead generation. But while we're supporting lead generation to convert the in-market buyers, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, this, and this so that in 2024, which will capture opportunity along the way through meetings, earned PR where they're like, damn, I love that episode. Hey, can you speak on our panel? And that's where you really start to see things. And then it grows. And then in 2024, when all of your competitors are still struggling to figure out how the hell to work with digital, but they're paying Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all these companies to get in front of people, you just spent the entire time building the community that's directly supporting them. So you don't have to pay to run Facebook ads. You just have to host the event because they already trust you. That is playing the long game. So, Steph, anything else?
I mean, it starts with baby steps. and you work your way up from there. You know, there's, and I think especially, you know, if your head of company is willing to put money behind you, but isn't willing to like throw a bunch of money at you, start small. Prove yourself. Say, hey, look, we did this thing. It took us 6 months. It was great. Can
Do
we
it on
have a little
Zoom.
more now? Please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah, I'll get your Oliver twist on. Get your Ollie twist on. Use Zoom. Like again, back to unpretentious marketing. Learn about your customer. Understand how they get informed and they learn and they tap their peer groups. Use Zoom. I'm using right now because we had a technical difficulty. A $15 crappy lav mic that connects through an adapter into my iPhone Memos app that I'm going to send Steph to hook up. Like, because we had an error with some stuff. You can do things in a way where it's very affordable. And you know what? It's still going. I got a call from a spam number and I wasn't sure if the recording would keep going, but it did.
Oh,
Shout
good.
out iPhone for supporting the hustle. Thought I put on mute. That's the thing. I think if I put on do not disturb, it shuts the Memos app. I'm not going to test it right now. Start somewhere. I'd actually encourage you to do it in-house for a little. Again, we'd love to support you and do. I mean, we love this process. We're building on a couple shows for clients now to support the New Year initiatives and things. And we love this process because it's like, how do we build a show around the company's identity? Like it's really fun. But it may actually be helpful for you to say, we have one person, it's just me and one person. We're going to do interviews with Zoom with our internal experts and just do subject matter expertise where maybe it's topical, maybe it's whatever, and it's Zoom based and you don't actually do any micro content. You just do full episodes and upload the audio to some transistor or whatever solution you want to use and the full video to YouTube, and you share the link to the YouTube video on your LinkedIn account and Facebook or whatever. And you just baby steps and you say, hey, to the board, we've gotten it down to how to do this, this, and this. We're ready to take a step. Can you allocate X to us? The goal is this. But to succeed in building value for the long term, you have to articulate what is valuable in the long term. The reason I told that story is so you can steal it and go use it internally. So if you want to be the authority in 2 years, we have clients, one in particular, that they're trying to go from $30 to $100 million. So I already had this conversation with them. So do you want to be the authority in the space? People, they need to know you. They need to be able to form an opinion on you. You need to don't be the sponsor, host the event. Anybody can spend money to sponsor. Be the reason they come into town.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, in storytelling, we always say show, don't tell. So with something like this, don't keep saying we have the best experts in X, Y, and Z. Show us. Get them to talk to us. Like, this is how they got to here. And this is how, this is what they know. And here's what they're willing to share.
100%.
And it will make you it will make you more credible. That's for sure. And the more credible you are, the more likely people are willing to put something in your pocket.
And the coolest part about it is right now, if you do it virtually, it's actually very acceptable because people understand what's happening. So you're in a fortunate scenario where like you could host an event if and the reason I say you could is like, if you're a new company, you could set a date for next year and just put it out there and just start promoting it. We could probably do that if we wanted to, right? Get strategic 2022 and it's a June event, right? And we just start promoting it. If people go, they go. If they don't, then you don't do it, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think at this point, having a virtual option is
here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And why not? It means you can get more people. It's more access to more people who may or may not have been able to go anyway. You can get people from across the country, across the world, people who wouldn't have, the means to get there originally. Why not? Why not?
Yeah. It comes down to the same stuff as always. Like, you got to close the gap with your customers. I mean, it's one of the things we preach and it's plastered on the website. It's like, you got to close the gap. Like, the person that has to pay their way to close that gap will always, always, always have to spend more and will have a more expensive customer acquisition cost. It's not that you're not going to get the deals. You're not going to not bring in the customers if you're decent in quality and in the game. But it comes down to like, how much is it going to cost you to bring that deal in, to bring that new relationship, to open up that strategic partner?
Right. Is it going to be worth it?
Right.
It's really the question in the end.
You got to close the gap. You have to find a way to bring it as close as possible. And if your goal is to close the gap with the customer, but you're not talking to the customer, and everything is short-term ROI focused of hit the monthly quota, hit the quarterly quota, I mean, what do you expect? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like, that's like, what do you expect if everything you're trying to accomplish is now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone likes to be flattered, but people can smell bullshit a mile away.
100%.
You know, if you don't have an authentic reason to say something to somebody, then they're going to know. Someone's going to know.
So like, you have to develop a systematic approach to natively speaking where you need to be speaking. Like, that's the nuts and bolts of everything we're talking. Every episode ever in perpetuity in history, that's the nuts and bolts. You have to find a way to systematically communicate natively where it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that's TikTok and LinkedIn right now, you got to learn how to play those games. Because I promise you, if all of the content is just LinkedIn and dropping it on TikTok, it's not going to work.
Right.
Like, we'll share some of the podcast content on TikTok, but that's not all of our content. It's a part of the strategy, right? While we're writing skits and trying to figure out a way to stay topical and on trend, we're testing different things that are top of the funnel, macro brand awareness. But then we use some of the podcast clips that are a little educational, value oriented. Not everybody's going to care about it, but the people that saw the other stuff, that then saw, it's a part of the game. But it comes down to, at some point, Facebook, it won't be the player it is today. The only thing we can guess is that long term, the places you're going to have to be to communicate to your customers is either going to be new, or you will have to pay to play there.
Right.
Again, new, meaning you don't know it exists yet or don't know how to participate there, or it's going to be available and you're going to have to pay to do it. So do you want to prepare to pay for it, or do you want to prepare to communicate there for free by developing that muscle today? That's really the punchline.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about this in a future episode for, you know, our Thanksgiving themed week, but there's got to be someone on your team who is already good at these things, you know?
Yeah.
There's definitely someone who like makes YouTube videos in their room when they go home. There's someone who, you know, makes TikToks of their dog and they go viral all the time. There's someone in your organization who is already good at this. So
100%.
Take a look at who you have around and see what you can do to highlight the people who are already good at these things.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm actually very excited for that episode because I think we got to get real with people sometimes, you know? while we talk a lot of, and again, we'll dig into it in a later episode, but it's like, we've been talking and the market's been communicating more and more about diversity and inclusion, where we look at people where everybody deserves equal opportunity, and we need to start thinking about the fabrics of what makes our companies, and the teams, our teams, and the communities, and different voices matter and different perspectives matter. But at the same side of that conversation, opposite side of the coin, we're not talking about what makes people unique and interesting. And I think that a lot of you, if you start to take a little bit of time as you close out the year, which we'll talk about in that episode, is you have some stars in your company that are interesting, that have a personality that isn't like the rest. And if you support them and give them infrastructure, I think you'll be stunned as to what amazing things come of it. That person that has been doing Minecraft for 20 years, and then you say, hey, we want to start a show that's not really like all the others, but it talks about technology. Would you want to host it?
Yeah.
And you know what? Talk about a long-term play. Do you think that person's going anywhere?
Not if you give them an opportunity that they're really excited about.
100%. So takeaways from the episode. 1, frame up the conversation with practical expectations going into the new year. If you're marketing and you're communicating to sales, you have to have some candor relating to, we're starting something new, we're doing something new. It's not going to immediately hit meetings on the books because we're going to have to work out the kinks. But here's what we're here to accomplish. Frame it out. you're still going to have, like, you can't just do the podcast and nothing else because you have to support lead generation. You're going to have to support product marketing and do different things that helps people hit quarterly, monthly targets, right? So there has to be a conversation of how you're allocating time and resources to demand generation and lead generation so that they understand, okay, this much, this much is to short-term value, this much is to brand. 75% of what we're doing, 80% of what we're doing is to support you today, but 20% of our time is about branding and demand generation. So 80% of our time and resources is still going to be helping you hit monthly and quarterly targets. But that other 20%, that's going to be where we build this show for 1 hour a week, for 4 hours a week, for 6 hours a week, because long term, we want to host a show, build a process to support awesome conversations, to build relationships with guests in a positive, productive way. We want to scale it to maybe do virtual panels to build more value and deeper into the industry. And then we want to be able to do events. We want to have our voice in the industry as an authority and a member of the community, not just the one paying for their sticker to be next to the name of the community. And that's how we're going to approach it. You can frame it that way. You have good expectations. You have a clear vision. And then when you go ask for the resources and systems you need, as long as you're asking in a way where, back to what Steph brought up, was you can start small with baby steps. Don't go into that team and say, we need to build a production studio. I need $100,000. One, 100 won't be enough. And two,
Absolutely not.
And two, say, hey, we think this is valuable and we're going to start with Zoom. We're going to only do full-length audio and video. Here's how we're going to frame it. We're going to hire a company to help us design a artwork or frame the show. And then we'll do ourselves so we can learn how to do it. And then after the end of the first quarter, we'll come back and we'll talk. If you can do those things, I think you'll not only earn respect from people for being practical, but having a real plan, but you'll also be able to articulate why it is a long-term play that has short-term benefits along the way. So, Steph, anything before we close this out?
I don't think so.
So.
Don't want to continue to repeat myself.
Yeah, you're good. It's all good. Hey, I appreciate everybody stopping by. I hope you're getting value. Obviously, we have the outro that kicks on after this, but look, we appreciate and look for the feedback. So as we look into season 2, as we start to shape things out, we want some feedback. We want some engagement here because it helps us learn a little bit more about which way we can take this, different things we can maybe drill down into. We want to have a balance of strategy and business conversations, but we also want to have some conversations that are more focused on some more just practical common sense things of like, let's get out of the boardroom and just talk with people for a minute and frame things that the way that I think it can help just make things a little more common and simple. So feedback is welcome, whether it's in the comments, whether it's a review, whatever it may be. But you guys know the deal. My name is Jeremy Francesi, Stephanie Yakovetsky, and we'll be back for more. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end. If you liked the video, smash the like button and hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the new episodes. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We will fold them into future episodes and make sure that you get the help and the answers you're really looking for all things marketing and communications.